Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening. And I would like to give a warm welcome to you all to this live conference, No Jab, No Job, Now What? No jab, no job, now what? Now, this conference was organized as a result of a recent government mandate in the United Kingdom, in which all frontline healthcare workers and even receptionists were to have a vaccination by the 1st of April 2022. And if they choose not to have the vaccine or the inoculation by the 1st of April 2022, then their jobs, their livelihoods are at risk. So this conference, what it is about, it is not a political forum, but what it is a chance for us to encourage, embrace, inform, and also enlighten and empower those people who feel as if their backs are against the wall. So that is what this conference is about today. Just a bit of housekeeping, first of all. Myself and my colleagues, Sharon and Shirlene, and other members of True Temperance International will be working in the background to collect all of your questions. So we do have a panel, and they will be presenting for at least 10 minutes, after which there will be a short question and answer session. So please use the chat either on the Zoom platform or on YouTube. Please place your questions there and we will endeavour to pass them on to the panelists and your questions will be answered. So as for me, my name is Joan Cornwall on the platform of Health Reformers UK. I spent the best part of 18 years working in the NHS, starting as an auxiliary nurse in musculoskeletal and orthopedics directorate. And although I had the chance to go on to be a registered nurse, I chose to go into the operational services management side of things in the NHS. And so I worked in service improvement also. And faith, following conviction, I left the NHS in 2015, and I've been self-employed ever since. So before I continue to hand over the conference to Pastor Davis, what I'd like to do is give his bio, a short bio to yourself. Dr. Sam Davis and his wife Rowena reside in the south of Spain on their health farm called Unachento. The name Unachento means 180, uno for number one, and Achento is 80. The name was chosen after Dr. Sam experienced a 180 transition in his health and experience. His health journey is a powerful testimony of God's ability to restore health unto thee and healing of our wounds in Jeremiah. In the same way, he would like others to experience holistic health according to God's health plan. Dr. Sam has recently completed a professional doctoral program in original medicine and is committed to the medical missionary work, recognizing that soon there will be no work done in ministerial lines, but medical missionary work, which is the gospel of healing and blessing and strengthening. Pastor Davis also holds a certificate in nutritional counseling. Previously, Dr. Sam has served the Seventh-day Adventist Church in South England as a pastor for 30 years. He has ministered in a variety of churches and also in departmental positions in the conference. So before taking early retirement, Dr. Sam served for 8 years as president of the South England Conference. Dr. Sam and Rowena have 2 children, 1 now deceased, and 6 grandchildren. So there are quite a number of you on this forum. Thank you so much for joining us, and to our friends on YouTube, please make sure that you reduce the traffic in the Zoom conference and also on YouTube so that we can managed to go through your questions and collate them appropriately. So now it gives me great pleasure to hand the conference facilitation over to our dear friend and colleague, Dr. and Pastor Sam Davis. Dr. D, over to you.
Thank you, Joan. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this platform. I'm delighted that you're able to join us from around the world, because the subject that we're talking about this afternoon is not just unique to us in the UK, but this is affecting people all around the world. We've seen President Biden doing vaccine mandates there in Australia, Canada, Germany, Austria, Belgium, Sweden, and we could just continue on, because it seems that what one country does, then others copy. And so Joan has already mentioned that we're not here to tell anyone what they ought to be doing. We're not going to politicize this forum. However, there is a starting premise while you are here, and that is that you're concerned about the fact that governments around the world are adopting a position of vaccine imperialism. That is, they're extending power and dominion over our bodies and what goes into our bodies. And we believe that only God has that right. The Apostle Paul reminds us, he says, you are bought with a price, therefore you are not your own. And so I do remember that at the beginning of this pandemic, the EU declared that no one would be forced to take the vaccine. But we are seeing them roll back on that more and more. And just this week, a friend of mine shared with me that he has a relative who's already taken the 2 jabs, and now his workplace has said, you better take the 3rd or you will lose your job. And so it doesn't stop, my friends. So the vaccine imperialism, once you've taken 2, there will be a 3rd and a 4th, and it will continue on and on. And so people are concerned about the mandates. They're concerned about the removal of their rights to choose. And for those of you who are not Christians, for those of you who are Christians, you may be looking at your church for some help, thinking that the church should be there to help and guide, only to find that the church also has its own vaccine mandates. And so we are very, very concerned. We've seen it already here in the UK. Nursing homes have been back in, I think it was the end of October, the nursing homes had to comply. Now it's going to be the NHS. And then what's next? Schools, government entities, and so on. And I was very intrigued this week to hear on the news that Greece has imposed fines for those who will refuse to take the vaccine if they're over 60. So they really are beginning to tighten the screw. And so what I want to do as we begin this afternoon is just let us bow our heads as we have a word of prayer, and then I will introduce our panelists to you. Let's bow our heads as we pray. Father, we thank you that we can come together this evening. We thank you for those who are on this platform. God, we are concerned about what is the government wants to put into our bodies without our consent. We believe we have a right to make choices about what goes into our bodies. And God, we pray that you will be with us as we go through this conference this afternoon. We ask for your leading and your guiding. Be with those who will present. Speak through them. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. So what I want to do this afternoon is to introduce our panelists to you at this time. These are experienced individuals, and the whole purpose of this, is that as the government tightens the screw, what are the answers? What can you do to make sure that you are financially independent? You're able to continue to look after the needs of the family, look after your own needs. And we have on the panel here individuals who have been able to use their skills to help themselves. And that's what we want to be able to do to gain some kind of financial independence, so that we are not bullied by the state. And so we have Laverne Picard. She is a financial consultant. She's a seasoned professional advisor and chartered accountant with over 30 years experience in the financial services sector, advising a wide range of clients. Having spent the majority of her career in employed roles, she took the big step of retraining to become a self-employed financial advisor in 2018. She's a volunteer local treasurer in her local church, and Laverne loves the Lord. And so we'll be hearing from her a little later on. We have Dr. David Addo. He's a naturopath, and he is living in Ghana. He's a lifestyle consultant, as well as CEO of the Good Life Naturopathic Clinic. He specializes in lifestyle diseases and works on the principle of prevention or reversing lifestyle diseases. David has been in practice as a naturopath since 1995, and in 2000, he set up the Good Life Wellness Center in the UK and then relocated to Ghana in 2009. And so we welcome David to this platform this afternoon. He is somebody who has traveled throughout Africa, teaching and training, and we welcome him. We have also David Hansen Bartholomew. He is a physiotherapist. David trained at Brunel University College in England, UK, qualified in 1996 with a BSc honours in physiotherapy. He commenced work in September 1996 for the NHS at the Wexham Park Heatherwood Hospital Trust for 31 months. This was followed by continued work for the NHS at the Sidcup Queen Mary's Hospital Trust for a further 7 years, where he specialized in musculoskeletal, neurological, and rheumatological areas of psychotherapeutic disciplines. So David is really very well experienced, and he is running his own practice, and we look forward to hearing from him a little later on. We have Lucille Fifield. She's a health director for Manor House. She's a co-founder and director of that facility. It is an education and wellness facility, currently the only one in the UK established as a sanitarium. She's a registered general nurse, health visitor with an emphasis on community health nursing. She has a Master's of Science in Public Health, and she has worked as an associate director in the NHS. During this time, her specialty was family and public health services. She resigned from the NHS in June 2011 to focus on her passion of assisting others to achieve perfect health through God's natural laws. And so, using her skills, working with her husband, they are there at Manor House, and Lucille is studying towards her doctorate in naturopathic medicine. And then we also have on this platform Dr. Aletta Carbone. She's a consultant surgeon and clinical director, and she has not said much about herself, and if she wants to share more, I'm sure that she will do that. Dr. Chidi Ngwaba, he is a lifestyle physician, good friend of ours, and he is a leading lifestyle doctor trained in surgery, general practice, and lifestyle medicine at Cambridge, UCL, and also Johns Hopkins in the USA. Chidi is a founding director of the European Society of Lifestyle Medicine, now ELMO. He has over 20 years of experience as a national and international health and wellness speaker, including a TED Talk on reversing diseases. He has advised the current UK government and opposition party on COVID-19 and its effects on different ethnic groups. Dr. Chidi appears regularly on television, giving advice, Vanessa Feltz, Sky News, and so on. And in 2016, he received a national award in leadership for his work on reversing diseases. And so we welcome Dr. Chidi to this platform this afternoon. We have Sonia Barnes, who is a nutritionist. Sonia, she's qualified, clinically trained naturopathic nutritional therapist, health coach, and health educator for 7 years. She is passionate about the power of nutrition and its impact on body functions. Sonia strongly believes that we are fearfully and wonderfully made and have a God-given right to good health, and that the food we eat and our lifestyle can make a difference. Sonia has a passion for working with people, especially women over the age of 40, to find their root in achieving their healthiest self. And so we welcome all of these panelists here with us today. And we're going to begin with Dr. Arletta. We welcome you, Dr. Arletta, and we hand over to you at this time.
Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Elita Carboni. I am a consultant plastic and reconstructive surgeon, as Pastor Sam had introduced me. And more importantly, I've been a Christian, Seventh-day Adventist Christian now for the past 29 years of my life. I currently work as a clinical director overseeing 7 departments in surgery. So the mandates and what's happening affects my life and how I deal with my staff members and how we plan for future services. And so my presentation today will be coming from a biblical point of view, looking at the challenges that the NHS is facing and some of the discussions that on a managerial level are happening to give you insight into what's actually going on at this time. From my point of view, as well as being a Christian, I'm a health reformer. I've done fellowship at Wellwood Hospital in Tennessee, USA, where I was exposed to natural healing methods. And it's something that I employ in my daily consultation practice, helping people to reverse diabetes, lose weight, etc., through natural methods. And also, I strongly believe that our bodies are the temple of God and that we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and that God created us, and therefore He knows how the best methods in helping us to stay healthy. I also believe that a healthy body leads to a healthy mind. And this is going to be very important as we go through time we look at the way how the NHS is and how the government's trying to restructure it. We are very privileged in the UK that we have free healthcare system, but it may not be the case in many years to come. And that's why it's important that the methods that God has given us in order to keep our bodies healthy is going to be even more important so that we can avoid getting ill unnecessarily. I'm just going to share my presentation with you at this time. Sorry. Apologies for this. Hopefully you can all see that now. As a surgeon, I thought it was interesting to try and talk about what consent is, because the issue that we're talking about for a lot of people who have decided at this time that they do not want to be vaccinated or are hesitant to get vaccinated, the question of mandating, which is already coming to place with healthcare workers, is this issue of consent. Now, I'm going to talk about it from a Christian point of view, that consent is a fundamental principle of God's rule, and it's something that pertains to the free will. So it's a case of consent is to agree to do something or to allow someone to do something to you. So as a surgeon, I have to obtain consent from you in order for me to do something to you. And if I was to do something to you without your consent, then I could well be locked up. So consent is a process, and it's permission that can be given or taken away. So even though you may consent at one time, you may withdraw that consent, and that's the process of it. It's this free will of being able to weigh up the options and make decisions about whether they're good for us or wrong for us that makes us free agents that God has created. And to have informed consent, you have to have the ability to know the information and understand and recall the implications, and more importantly, have the ability to refuse. Compulsion. Now, this is the art of compelling or to force someone to do something that they may not want to do. It's constraint or coercion. It's a state or condition of being compelled. And it's usually a strong, usually irresistible impulse to perform an act, especially one that is irrational or contrary to one's will. And I've just summarized this here, the two things, because I think it's very important when we're talking about mandating and what we're seeing on a worldwide scale of unprecedented measures that governments all around the world are taking. What we see is a systemic practice that if everybody's compulsion will ultimately lead to something that can destroy you. With God's law, we know that with the Spirit of the Lord, there is liberty, as it says in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17. We also have texts in the Bible that we're all very familiar with about our bodies being the temple of God. And I know that for some of you, these are the arguments that you're using as to why you do not feel impressed to have the vaccine at this time. And again, we go on to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 here that tells us that our bodies are the temple of God who is in us, and which God gave to us, and that we are not our own because we are bought with a price. Therefore, we are to glorify God in our bodies, in our spirit, which belong to God. Most of you may be familiar with this book, Great Controversy, and if you've not read it, then please get in contact with the host of this, because it's an excellent book which talks about some of the issues that we're actually facing at this time of life. But I just want to talk to you and compare and contrast what we're experiencing now with what the actual principles of God's law is. And basically, God never forces the will or the conscience, but Satan's constant resort is to gain control of those whom we cannot otherwise seduce by compulsion. Through fear or force, he endeavours to rule the conscience and to secure homage to himself. To accomplish this, he works with both religious and secular authorities, moving them to the enforcement of human laws in defiance of the law of God. And again, another excellent book, if you've not read it, is The Desire of Ages, which it tells us that in matters of conscience of the soul, the soul must be left untrammeled. No one is to control another's mind, to judge for another, or to prescribe his duty. God gives to every soul freedom to think and to follow his own convictions. Every one of us shall give account of God to himself. No one has a right to merge his own individuality in that of another. In all matters where principle is involved, let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. In God's kingdom, there is no lordly oppression or no compulsion or manner. Now, I say this because, again, I'm going to emphasize the purpose of this presentation is not to compel you to take the vaccine or to compel you not to take the vaccine, because that is not my job, but here to present the information to you, and that this has to be your choice based on the evidence that you have done and what you feel in your own conscience that you must do. So I'm just going to go on to where we are actually legally. So it's actually on the 11th of November 2021, this was the deadline for care home workers with the law that was passed under the Health and Social Care Act of 2008. So what the government did, instead of writing a whole new law that would have to be passed through and be made a bill, which would take time, what they did was addend it onto a previous bill of 2008, that the healthcare workers, home care workers, would need to be fully vaccinated. And this term, fully vaccinated, I've put in kind of inverted commas, because that can mean a whole host of things, as we now know that we're talking about fourth boosters for patients at this moment and looking to roll out fourth boosters. So this has a whole implication about where we're going when we talk about fully vaccinated. So anyway, the deadline is that they either get double vaccinated at the time or face unemployment. Now, there is a judicial review underway to see whether this amendment was lawful. So it's legal at the moment, but the question is whether this is lawful. The first review was rejected just before the deadline came in November, and it's been appealed, and we wait to see what happens. But the regulations were challenged specifically on the 6 grounds that I've highlighted there, which you can read for yourself, hopefully. But what was interesting was that it was deemed that it was irrational, since the vaccine itself does not reduce the transmission rates, which was what the government was hoping that when the vaccine originally came out, that was one of the things that was proposed by the drug companies. So we now know that Sajid Javid has announced that he wants to roll this out also to NHS staff or health and care staff. And this basically affects not people who just work in the NHS, but anybody who works in ambulance services also, or in any CQC approved healthcare setting. So even if you work in the independent sector, if you work privately, if it's a CQC approved building, then you will need to comply with this directive. Now, the deadline for workers, which I've listed below, is for the 1st of April 2022. And it also applies to managers who are front facing. So you might have managers who come down to the emergency department to make sure that things are flowing. Yes, they will also need to have both vaccines, or 2 vaccines, and then consider the booster. It also applies to, it's quite far reaching, it applies to receptionists, porters, cleaners, radiology staff, pharmacy staff, transport staff, volunteers, basically anybody who works in a hospital and may come into any contact with a patient will need to be double vaccinated. The proposed policy does not apply to the boosters or to the flu jab, but the government has said that they're keeping this under review and they will look to make amendments as necessary. So I get, as my job as a clinical director, I do get a lot of papers that come through the government that I need to read and try and digest and disseminate to my staff. And I get this weekly. We also have weekly COVID briefing meetings to understand where we're actually at the moment. And this was from a paper that was actually published in October, which I've put the link down below. And if anybody wants any of the links, then please feel free to get in contact with the organisers and I can provide you with the research. But the government have estimated when they've rolled this out and proposed this, that as a result of this policy, they anticipate that the 54,000 unvaccinated people who work in health and social care will now get vaccinated. But that will leave approximately 126 workers who probably will refuse outright, and they're expecting them to leave, and they're just taking this as a hit. They've done all the cost analysis of how much this will cost and which areas will be affected. It's all written down. It can be found on the government websites. Now, what's interesting with what the mandate that they're proposing is that the only exemptions documented will only be clinical exemptions. So things like religious exemptions, which I'm going to talk about, may not be considered. Now, I know for a lot of people that not just Christians, but people of other faiths, taking the vaccine doesn't sit comfortably with them, and they do not want to take it because of religious reasons. Just to point out that in the vaccines, whether they're the mRNA vaccine or the AstraZeneca vaccine, there is no fetal cells actually in the vaccine, but the vaccines were based off fetal cell lines. Some employees may refuse to be vaccinated based on the basis of religious beliefs. And it's important to note that if this is something that you wanted to discuss with your employer, religious beliefs do not have to be shared by everybody within that religion. So, for example, I'm a Seventh-day Adventist. My church has decided that they're going to support the vaccine rollout and encourage people to be vaccinated. But just because my church leaders may decide that does not mean that they're speaking for the whole church. In other words, my religious beliefs, if they're strongly held or more strongly held or less strongly held, it does not have to be shared by everybody within that religion. So something worth thinking about. There's also the examples of philosophical exemptions. And this again is written down in documentation that an employee who has an anti-vaccination belief could argue it as a protected philosophical belief under the Equality Act 2010. And this act protects some beliefs such as climate change or the use of only natural medicine if deemed genuinely held and worthy of respect. And there are legal subtleties around whether the anti-vax movement would be protected, but there is at least a possibility that it could be, and if you were sacked, whether this could lead to compensation. So it's something that is worth, again, if this is for you, seeking legal advice. So what was actually published by the government, which deems to be a clinical or a medical exemption? This is the latest information I received. It was on October 4, but I'm sure that this may be reviewed because things are changing quite frequently. So if you have a severe allergy to any of the constituents in any of the COVID vaccinations, so you can find links to what the ingredients are. Again, I can post those links in the chat if people want that. So if you do have allergies, that might be a problem. And again, something you'd need to discuss with your GP. Adversely, if you've had an adverse reaction to your first dose, so if you've had the first one, then you're not legally obliged to take the second one. But again, it depends on what is classified by an adverse reaction by your GP. We know that with the vaccines that there is lots of documentation about clotting disorders, whether that's platelet disorders or people actually clotting too much, which has led to other problems. But interestingly, at the moment, the government is not considering this as an exceptional circumstance to not be vaccinated. So if that is your condition where you are having clotting disorders, that may not be deemed as an exceptional circumstance to be exempt from the vaccine. There are time-limited things. So if you've got a medical problem, some medical problems which are short-term can be exempt. Although the JCVI, which is the vaccine committee, advise women who are pregnant to be vaccinated. That is not mandated. So pregnancy, you can be offered your first dose, but you can actually decline that in discussion with your obstetrician. You need to know that if you are pregnant, there remains limited evidence of safety for the vaccine in pregnancy. This is a direct quote from the paper from the Department of Health and Social Care. But those who are trying to get pregnant are not eligible for exemption. So what next? I'll try and rush this through. The discussion for mandatory vaccination has not been tabled for discussion in Parliament. So although this is being touted in the media, it's not actually on the Parliament timetable at the moment. And coming up to the Christmas break, and MPs need to have their time off, don't they? It's likely that the discussion will occur after the Christmas break. So let's say if it did happen in January, they have to give a 12-week grace period from when it's passed, if and when it's passed into law. Now, the proposed deadline that all the trusts in NHS England are giving for workers is that you need to have your first vaccination by the 2nd of February 2022 in order for you to be able to have your second vaccination by the 1st of April. But like I said, there is this 12-week grace period, and we don't know exactly what's happening. A lot of my colleagues as directors, we're seeing what happens. We're hoping it doesn't happen because it's a logistical nightmare for the amount of people who do need to be vaccinated. The government touts on their website that 92% of NHS workers are double vaccinated, but in reality, those figures are probably overestimated, and we're facing problems. For my staff, I've had doctors who have already given in their resignation because they refused to get vaccinated. They've had COVID, they have natural immunity, they've read the studies. For them, it's not the right decision for them, and they won't be compelled, and they're not Christian people. So there are a lot of people who, whether it's religious or for medical reasons, do not want to be compelled to take a vaccine. So if people are not vaccinated, what is the options for the trusts that you work in? Well, the first one will be to redeploy staff to non-patient facing working. That's quite difficult if you're working as a nurse, for example, and you're not in management. So that would be the first option. Then the second one will be suspension, so not allowing the employee to actually return to the workspace. And then after review, then that will be followed by dismissal if the employee has not complied with a reasonable request. So this thing about this term reasonable request is an interesting one, because even if it's mandated by law and the trusts give you different options of getting vaccinated, this actually hasn't been tested by law or in the courts at the moment. So it is still kind of a bit up for debate. So I'm just going to talk to you about if you're unvaccinated and you plan to be unvaccinated, that your employer has a duty to listen to you as a staff member. they have a duty to note your concerns with empathy and understanding. There shouldn't be any victim blaming. And this, you need to be mindful of your conversations that you do have with them. I would advise you to write these down and document them. Vaccination requires your informed and voluntary consent, and it cannot be forced. Okay. And if you refuse vaccination, then your employer, especially if it's been mandated by law, has the right to consider other steps to protect them as an organisation. Okay. One of the things that they may do is that they may warn that all the vaccination is likely to be a condition of employment, review your contract, but remember that your contract is something that needs to be agreed by you and your employer, otherwise it's a breach of your contract. And you can read there that you can claim constructive unfair dismissal. Any incentives offered should not discriminate against employees, such as your race, age, your beliefs or disabilities. Okay. So my counsel to you, as people who may be in this position, I can only give counsel from the Bible. That's the only thing that I'm using as my stay. And what I've realized when I look at people who were kind of speaking against the powers that be, such as Moses or Esther, is they weren't coming with attitude to the people. Oftentimes, because we're faced with our backs against the wall, we may become very confrontational, very aggressive. And this is not the way that we need to do things. The counsel that we see demonstrated time and time again is about having a chat, being respectful, but obviously being firm with your requests. And an example of this is Daniel and his friends in Daniel chapter 1, where they were being asked to eat foods which were against their religious beliefs, against their compulsion. And Daniel had purposed that he was not going to take any of the food. And what did Daniel do? He didn't make a fuss about it. He called the person aside who was in charge and gave them a test saying, look, you know, I'll eat the good food, give us this food for 10 days and see if we're any better. And he put God to the test. For those of you who have natural immunity, get an antibody test and prove yourself. Is your antibody still there after 3 months? Is it still there after 6 months? Do you need, you know, that's one of the questions. Prove if the human immune system that God has made really is working. But what I'm trying to say is that come with a humble spirit, but also be firm in your decisions. You do have rights. If you decide to remain unvaccinated, I do have some quotes and texts from the Bible to encourage you, because it would mean a loss of your livelihood. And this is one of my favorite texts that says that God will supply all my needs according to his riches and glory by Christ Jesus. I also read it in Psalms 37:25 that I have been young and now I'm old, and yet have I not seen the righteous forsaken, nor his seed begging bread. So I'm encouraged by these texts that if you have the principle that this is what, from a religious point of view, that this is not for me, and that it may be that if I perish, I perish. If I lose my job, I lose my job, then so be it. But I know that if you have prayed to God and you are with God, that God will be with you and he will not forsake you in this regard. I could go on and on about it, but I appreciate that there are other people here who need to talk. But the next text that I just wanted to share with you is the Bible tells us that a prudent man sees the evil and hides himself, but the simple pass on and are punished. When this pandemic started in November 2019, when I was aware of it, I could see that when it came to England in March, and then by April the 8th, they were talking about vaccines, that I and a number of people could see that this was going to be mandated. Thankfully, I can say and testify that the Lord has moved me into different positions to help other people, to guide them through this process. But we have to be prudent as people. We can see what's happening around the world. We know that things are going to get worse. If we read the Bible, we know these things have to happen. So I encourage you to step in faith and trust God and try God as to whether these things will be. Make the decision in your heart as to what you need to do. Pray about it. And as with all people, with Esther, with Daniel, with the early Christians, they made a decision. With Esther, she said, if I perish, I perish. And for her, she had a favorable decision. With Daniel, he went into the lion's den and he actually had to be with the lions You know, God didn't spare him at all. He actually had to be with the lions, but then he was delivered. And then there was the early Christians who were sent to the lions and they were slaughtered. But the question is whether you're going to trust God through all of it. That's the most important thing. Whatever you decide in your life, I'm going to talk about different ways of how we can move into different forms of working. The most important part is that the decisions that you make, the principles that you make, that you stick to it and that you trust God. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Aletta, very much. Just have a couple of quick questions for you. I know that we're going to run over time here, but somebody's asking the question. She says, I'm a nursing student and my university says that the mandate applies to us also. Do you know that if this is correct? Because they're not on the front line, are they?
Nursing students, mostly, they do kind of an apprenticeship work. So they usually are actually shadowing nurses on the wards. So it may be a condition of the university that might be a case. It's very difficult to say because it's not mandated and they are not employed by the trust, as it were, per se. So there is something that it might be worth investigating a bit further. It's always worth, again, discussing it with your university head as to the convictions and to see where you need to be, and then to progress from there. The worst case scenario would be that they would put you off the course, but then you would have rights in regards to that.
Sure. And then let me just ask you about constructive dismissal. You had alluded to that briefly. Surely if your job's on the line, you're being forced out, is there a case for constructive dismissal?
At the moment, there's a judiciary review with the healthcare workers who have who from the 11th of November, as I said, have been some people have been suspended or dismissed. So we're waiting as healthcare professionals to actually see what the results of the judiciary review is, whether this was legal, as to how that's going to help healthcare workers. But remember, you've entered into a contract with that trust regarding certain things, and they're changing the principles of the tenets of that contract without your agreement. So again, it's something that you could seek legal advice about.
And could you say something about the grace period? When does the grace period start, please?
The grace period will start when I don't know whether they're going to make amendments to the health and social care bill like they did with the healthcare workers, or make a completely new one, or amend it to the coronavirus bill. But whenever it's amended and passed by the House of Commons and probably have to go to the House of Lords, then the 12 weeks would start. But at the moment, it's not tabled for 2021. It's probably going to start at the beginning of 2022.
Okay, just one more question. I know we'll see if we can come back to some of them. I know that you mentioned NHS workers in hospital and ambulance staff in relation to the mandatory jabs. Can you confirm whether this applies to community NHS staff members, i.e. health visitors and so on?
Yes, it will do. Anybody who is employed by CCG, which will be under the care of CQC. So anybody that has CQC people going around that will apply. So community workers also, yes.
Dr. Aletta, thank you. Aletta, thank you so much for an excellent start. And I know we're constrained by time. If we can come back to some more questions, we will do so. Let me go to Lucille Fifield this time. Lucille, thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor.
Hello, hi, hello everybody. Hi. Yeah, so what I'll be talking about is how we can repurpose our skills. I'm going to share my screen straight away. Okay, so can everyone see that?
Yep.
Okay, so as it was mentioned in the bio, I'm currently the health director of Manor House. So Manor House is a health education and wellness centre that is located in Staffordshire. And we understand that it is the only one that is operating as a sanitarium in England. Additionally, and it wasn't mentioned in the bio, I am the business director of the Association of Health Reformers. And my responsibility is to support ministries, additional ministries in the UK, I worked latterly, the last part of my time in the National Health Service, I worked as an associate director, and I was a senior manager for over 8 years. Similar to Joan decided to walk away. In June 2011, I was Horizon scanning, and Miss Carboni, she mentioned about the prudent man seeth the evil and hides himself. And in June 2011, I was impressed that the work that I was doing was, there was no legacy that I was leaving behind. So I would be setting up services, commissioning services. A new government would come in and they would immediately decommission that service as well. And I thought, I'm using all my skills, my energy, my time, my knowledge for services where there are no legacy. So in June 2011, I chose to take voluntary redundancy. And during that time, after 2011, I had to go through a process of re-education. I was trained in the allopathic mode of working. I had to repurpose my skills. My thinking had to change. My practice had to change so that God could use me to work in ministry and in business. So the purpose of this presentation today is to really talk about the opportunities for Christian health and social care workers who want to use this current situation of mandatory vaccines to set up their own business and ministry. I have limited time, so I'll be only able to scratch the surface. Now, there's a clear distinction between worldly enterprises and a Christian ministry and business. And so what we're going to be looking at, we're going to look at Jesus's business model. He was a businessman. Now, at the age of 12 years old, he said to his parents, Joseph and Mary, I must be about my Father's business. He was referring to his heavenly Father. What was Jesus's business model? And it's mentioned in Matthew 4, and it mentions that Jesus taught, which addressed the mental aspect. He preached the spiritual component, and the healing addressed our physical nature. As Jesus is our examples, if we are Christians, Jesus was not about making money, but his purpose was about serving. It says in the Bible that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and give himself as a ransom for many. The Gospels show that Jesus spent more time in healing than in teaching. Jesus had a holistic business approach. That was Jesus's business model, and it was highly successful. It says in the scripture that great people are queuing up to see Jesus, to be healed. What would it be like if you had people, you had your own clinic, your therapy clinic, and you had people queuing, a long waiting list of people eager to be seen by you? We know that the NHS focuses on the physical. It deals poorly with mental health. And if you talk about the spiritual component, if you talk about praying, you could be faced with discipline. So if you're seriously thinking about going into full-time ministry, there are certain essential foundational reading that we recommend. The very first one is Isaiah 58, and that chapter really pertains to our times, the things that we should be doing as Christian. Isaiah 58. There are other important books as well. All these books, I may add, all this reading material is freely available online. We have the Ministry of Healing that was written in 1905 by Ellen White, and this was primarily written for doctors and nurses. However, because a lot of Seventh-day Adventist doctors work in allopathy, then the call went out to every member of the church should act as medical missionaries. There are other books as well, Counsels on Diets and Foods. There's Medical Ministry. The Broken Blueprint by Vance Farrell is another important book, and the Medical Missionary Manual as well. These are important books that really tell us how we should be acting, the skills that we need to have in place, and also how our thinking needs to be changed as well. I'd just like to share with you this flyer. It's from Advent Books, and it's the Independent Business Ministry. So they are looking at where the need to do mission work. And they looked at the ratios of Adventists to the population. Currently, I'm in Jamaica. Yes, I'm in just over Rose Hall by Montego Bay. And in Jamaica, we know that the ratio of Adventists to non-Adventists is 1:9. It's 1:9. And if we go through all the different countries at the start of the COVID and the lockdowns, a lot of Adventists started moving around to different parts of the world. If we look at the ratio, you know, Zimbabwe, there's 1 in 32, New Zealand, 1 in 245. Do you know what the ratio of Adventists to non-Adventists in the UK? It's nearly 1 in 2,000. There's a great work to be done in the United Kingdom, and not only great work, but great opportunities as well. Ellen White, this is a lady who gave us a lot of information, and she wrote some of those books which I mentioned as well. She had a dream in 1877 where she saw busy beehives where bees were actively at work and they were doing a lot of work. And in San Francisco in America, there was a busy activity of work. So if we apply that dream, and you can also do a search online and find the details of that dream, just put Ellen White and beehives. And if we read that story, we recognize that there's a great work to be done in the UK. So in San Francisco, where this dream that she had, she saw a number of activities or businesses or ministries that was being done. So this is actually what was happening. So one of the first things that was being done in San Francisco, people were visiting the sick and the destitute. So that could be rough sleepers, finding homes for orphans. So if we look at that, bring that to our modern day. So this is talking about foster care. There's opportunities. Very few Adventists actually do fostering. And there's opportunities for children's homes. So for instance, in the West Midlands, we have a children's home that is currently being set up. They are struggling to find a social care manager to run that children's home. This could be a great opportunity for a social worker with skills in fostering and adoption or straightforward children's services to repurpose their skills and work as a manager in the children's home. There's work for the unemployed, nursing the sick in their homes. As a part of Manor House Ministry, one of the things we recognize is that after health guests come to the wellness center, they spend a number of days there, but then they go home and they need the counseling and the support at home as well. There is so much need out there. There are people who need care within the home, but we haven't got the workers to do it. The need is very, very great. So Manor Care at Home is set up. It does not need to be CQC registered. We've looked into that in great detail because the work that you are doing doesn't fall under that remit. So nursing the sick in their homes, their street and door-to-door ministry, any ministry that is set up, we need to be having literature freely available for people walking into that setting. And then there's opportunities for cooking demonstrations and other demonstrations as well. So classes for healthful living and care of the sick. Again, when we have health guests come into Manor House, we haven't got the time to undertake cooking demonstrations. And people said, we need to know how to cook these plant-based foods. So there's opportunities. Those people are very skilled at doing plant-based food to do these cooking demonstrations and it to be monitorized as well. There's also children's school. We know when we had lockdown, a lot of the children were at home. Many of those parents realized who were doing teaching their children at home that they had the skills and the ability to teach their children, but they haven't got the broad knowledge in terms of, say, anatomy and physiology, biology, chemistry, and all those subjects, or even maths. And so there's opportunities for people to provide online education for those parents who choose to home educate their children. There's working men's homes, houses of multiple occupancy, hydro facility, wellness centers, which are satellite clinics, health food companies, opportunities for health food companies. A few years ago, we had Granos, but we sold it off before the world came on board with veganism. What a lost opportunity. But the opportunity is still there for those people who are really into health food development and production to set up a small health food company. Vegetarian cafes as well that are closed on the Sabbath, medical practices, which are Seventh-day Adventist GP surgeries, and dental practices as well. Now, the last 10 points, from point 10 to point 14, these can be all delivered in a center of health, hope, and healing. So the last one is an actual center that is in the process of being developed. The estates manager at Manor House, it's Arthur Fifield, he's my husband. He's bought a property. He was inspired to buy it. I asked him, what are you going to do with it? He didn't know. He was inspired to buy this property. And this property consists of a large 5-bedroom house, which has since been refurbished. There is a church in the community and also a church hall. We have the opportunity to apply for a grant, so we don't have to pay it back, of £50,000 to refurbish the church, to make it into a facility to provide clinics where private doctors or counseling and different therapies as well, just like, for instance, a physiotherapist who wants to do a massage, they can provide that within this setting. The vision is to have medical practices and therapy clinics of various services. We also have another 20,000 to put into it as well. So in total, £70,000 that we have to set up the Centre of Health, Hope and Healing. But we need a health manager to set it up and run it. We haven't got the capacity to do it as well. So the question is, how to repurpose your skills, how to go about setting up your business ministry. Now, the Association of Health Reformers was set up to support health and social care workers who are transitioning from these sectors and who have a desire to work in full-time ministry, to establish treatment rooms or clinics or therapy rooms and wellness centers or restaurants. Now, some members will want to develop their own practice in naturopathic. You know, you're going to hear the experience of a couple of people who have done that. You'll be able to learn from them how they managed to do that and how they are living off that ministry as well. The business development team of the Association of Health Reformers will provide assistance in the form of webinars, lectures, training, mentoring, to help our members to establish the business acumen and mindset of using their skills to provide an efficient, confidential, safe and professional service in the community. So you've all heard of Dragon's Den. Dragon's Den is a well-known, popular program where multi-millionaire investors will want to put some of their cash into businesses to help set them up and also support them on that journey. We do not have millionaires, but what we have set up is Heaven's Storehouse, We have Christian investors who are keen to support and loan their cash in setting up Christian businesses and ministries. So we, our board, which is Association of Health Reformers and Manor House, are here to help support and establish medical missionary clinics or mini sanitariums in the UK. We are looking for skilled, passionate, spiritually committed Christians and Adventists who recognize the time. Elita mentioned the times that we are living in and are prepared to establish these clinics. We're offering interest-free loans to invest in equipment, resources, and mentoring, as well as low interest loan repayments. So if you're interested and want to know more, then contact the Association of Health Reformers. So as I come to a close, I have one question to ask each one of you. What business model are you following? Yes. Do you want to do a great work in the community? Do you want to repurpose your skills? And do you want to follow Jesus' holistic business model of teaching, preaching, and healing? Thank you.
Thank you, Lucille. We are going to struggle with our time, but I just wanted to, somebody's asked a question. Some of these ministries that you've talked about, are they not affected by government mandates? You know, will people be able to do this in the forum and the settings that you're talking about?
Yes, it's the way that you set up your ministry. So for instance, Manor Care at Home, we had a discussion with Care Quality Commission about the service that we wanted to offer. And it does not need to be registered with CQC. And in fact, you're not going to the NHS for services. You're not commissioning, you're not buying, you're not buying that service from the NHS. You are going to be independent. You're operated in a private capacity. And as such, that common law agreement is between you and that client that comes to you for their service.
Okay. And one of the things I understood from you, Lucille, is really you're trying to tell people to look at the skills that they have, look at how they can use those skills. You talked about children's services, you've talked about cooking demonstrations. These are all things that people in the public, and you talked also about the ratio of 1 to 2,000 non-Adventists. It doesn't even have to be Adventist, but you're really looking at people repurposing their skills, the skills that they have now, trying to do that ahead of when the government mandate will come in so that they can repurpose those skills and use it to really fund their lifestyle.
Yes, I am. If you remember at the beginning, I said it really took me 6 years to unlearn. And what people have to do it now, they have to do it very, very quickly. They have to spend a lot of time studying and praying as well, asking God to lead you in the direction that you should go. Because when we set up Manor House, it wasn't our intention to set it up. In fact, we had a property that we offered to someone else, and they said, no, it's not in the convenient location. And so God impressed us that we were the ones to set it up. So what we have to learn very, very quickly now.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks, Lucille. In this interest of time, I'm going to move on. Dr. Chidi is with us. Dr. Chidi is a medical practitioner. I think we all know Dr. Chidi very well, and also an entrepreneur. And so, Dr. Chidi, welcome to this platform, and thank you. God bless you.
Well, thank you very much. It's obviously a pleasure to be here, and I'm grateful for those that have spoken so far. Very interesting, and I'm grateful that there are so many people logging in, because this tells us something, that this is very important to people who are not just Adventists, but they're also in the healthcare professions and actually thinking about leaving their jobs. This is massive. I only really want to say two things. The first thing is, look, we're all at this place where we're thinking about starting again, really. I was thinking about starting again. And this isn't something that most of us would ever have wanted to be doing right now at this stage of our lives. Many of us may be frightened. You can't see into the future what's going to become of me, financially, what's going to become of me. Well, if you don't mind, I do understand how you may be feeling, but I'm just going to say a few things that maybe you haven't heard yet and maybe you need to hear. And that is, if you're at this beginning stage, it's probably a very good idea to not so much think about what's going to happen to me, but this is actually an opportunity to think, I wonder what God's plan is for me in this. What is God's plan? You may have desires in your heart about what you think you're going to do. Again, I'm going to say, still ask yourself, I'm just wondering what God's plan is for me. And as you're wondering, start praying about it. Because this is I'm going to use the word, an opportunity that's been forced on you. You may have been 20, 30, 50 years in a certain profession, but perhaps God is now saying he wants you to do something else with your talents, with your God-given talents that you've worked on, honed on. And we're at this time, even if they back down with the vaccine mandate, at least we have seen the whites of their eyes and the sharpness of their teeth, that this is what they can do at any stage. So relying on certain professions for the future may not be something that we should be doing. Along with that, there is this, along with the fear of the future, there is this tendency to think about people as the enemy, people as the enemy, the hospitals, the officials, the politicians, the people who are criticizing you for not taking the vaccine. And I would just counsel you not to fall into that trap either, because I believe that is a trap of the enemy. We all know that text. We fight not against flesh and blood. The enemy is not flesh and blood. The enemy is not people. We know who the enemy really is. And sometimes we can be tempted into hating, fearing, condemning other people. My counsel is, don't get sucked into that. I believe that God has a purpose for all of us. In the midst of all of that is going on, he has a purpose for you and he has a purpose for me. And you may find, in fact, I believe if you search hard enough, you will find that the future purpose is even better than the purpose you have right now. So let us not be afraid. Let us not be dragged into this tussle of, who's right, who's wrong, whatever. But let's be Christian-minded. Let's think about how Christ was when he was around on this earth. And I'm saying that because our ministry shouldn't just be thinking about, well, how am I going to look after my brothers and sisters in Christ and everything. I'm saying part of our ministry is going to be to minister to those people who we think are the oppressors. That's got to be part of it. Because when Christ was walking around with us, he was saying he healed people who were the oppressors, the Roman centurions and all that. So that's the kind of mindset that we're going to have to get into if we want to do God's work. It is obvious that time is short and, that Satan is wrath with the earth, but we must not be tempted to be stressed, to be fearful, and to do things just out of fear. So that's the first thing I want to say. Now, the second thing I want to say is simple also. I'm quite a simple guy. Many of you know the sort of work that I do, and it's really about helping people to reverse their diseases. I spend all of my time now, if people have chronic diseases, blood pressure, diabetes, the stuff you've heard about before already today, I will help them to reverse disease. And I have this program and it's called Life Colors. Some of you may have come across it. I've been working on this for many years, and many people throughout this country and Europe and indeed the world have been adopting it. So as I was telling you, it's time to think and pray about what you're going to do. I have obviously had to think about myself too. What is my plan? What am I going to do? What am I going to leave? What is the legacy I want to leave, and how am I going to help people? So what I found throughout this pandemic is that the underlying diseases, the chronic lifestyle diseases, obviously they make people much more susceptible to COVID-19. So it seems that in a very real way, dealing with underlying diseases has become a priority, which should have become a priority. It's not seen as a big priority yet because we're dealing with vaccines and everybody's got to be vaccinated. But really, if we could deal with those underlying diseases, my goodness me, not just for COVID and whatever is to come, we would be helping ourselves to bulletproof ourselves for the future. So the life colors, okay, it's not going. Oh, there you go. So the life colors, which represent all these different diseases, I have thought to myself, well, what can we do for the future? And I guess this is a kind of appeal to all of you who are watching and listening. If you're interested in helping people to reverse their disease, as you've heard, you can go to certain health institutions. But what we're doing now, and we've been kind of testing it out in different parts of the world, is recruiting people who can learn some of the basic skills of being able to teach people how to reverse, improve, or prevent certain diseases so that they could be these independent characters who are going to be out there helping people in their community. This could obviously be done online. And I mean, I do much of my work online and over the phone. So you certainly don't need to be CQC accredited, and you certainly won't need a vaccine to do it. And what we're now working on is a system whereby we can train people up. They can be these sorts of leaders, and they can help people in their communities. They can also generate more leaders. Now, as well as helping people in their health, this is obviously for a certain fee that they will be doing it. It doesn't need to be a great fee, because you can actually heal, or hope you can help lots of people for a minimal fee, but it will allow you to sustain yourself and maybe even prosper a bit. So that's what we're working on. And if people are actually interested in being part of this, because I think it's a fantastic opportunity to be in this sort of work, well then you let us know and you contact us. And if you do want to contact us, the best thing to do is just look up what I'm proposing. It's on the website drchidi.com, and there are options where you can email me directly and put your request, and if you want to have questions. Now, I'm also going to be publishing the launch of these things on Twitter and Instagram. So those of you who are not on it, find somebody who can get you on it. And if you just see what I've not been posting for a long time because I've been working on all of this, but what will happen is that I will be launching a lot of this stuff and making it available and advertising it out to people on Twitter and Instagram. So, and these are my contact details, Dr. Chidi, MD. As I say, this is what I'm planning to do. And I guess everybody else has to figure out what they are planning to do. I have been thinking, praying, discussing this for a very long time. I believe that this is a way that we get our health message out very, very quickly, and it can also sustain people whilst they're doing it. Because as we can see, I don't know that we can ever depend on the government to be supporting us in the future. Okay, that's all I've got to say. Thank you very much. Stop sharing.
Excellent, Dr. Chidi. Thank you very much. You've given us your details there in the chat, and really you've made yourself available. Just want to thank you for that. And I just wanted to ask you, Chidi, what is the government's current response to the antigen test, or, you know, if you've had the COVID-19 virus already? Are they still expecting that you should, if you're working in one of these entities, because we know that the natural immunity now would be better than the vaccine, are they still expecting you to take the vaccine?
Yes, from what I understand, the latest thing I've read, and I was looking at it this week, is that whether you've had the virus or not, that doesn't come under, and maybe I could be corrected, and that doesn't matter as to whether they want you to have the vaccine. Also, even if you've had COVID-19, you may not always have antibodies to show, and our immune system doesn't just work on antibodies. I mean, really, T cells help us to defend ourselves against recurring viruses too, but we don't have tests for those as of yet. So as I see it, and I'm happy to be corrected here, the government simply wants you to have a vaccine. And unless you have the vaccine, you are not able to be protected. But we know that the vaccine doesn't stop you from transmitting the disease, doesn't stop you from getting the disease. The mandate doesn't really make sense, but that's what they're going for. Okay,
all right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chidi. All right, that's excellent. I'm now going to call on Laverne. Laverne, if you're with us, I know you're with us, so come forward. You're the financial advisor in the group. Please, you're the next person, Laverne.
Yes, good evening, everyone. And I think you'll agree with me, the speakers that we've heard from so far have been absolutely excellent and given us all some food for thought in terms of what we can do next if we are faced with challenges in keeping our jobs and supporting our families. So from a financial point of view, the main thing is that we exercise good stewardship. And I'm not just talking about from a church point of view, giving tithes and offerings, because that's a given if we are Seventh-day Adventists. And I know not everyone on this Zoom this evening is a Seventh-day Adventist, but I'm talking about being a good steward, a good manager of the finances that God has blessed you with, and also living in a more frugal way. So that means limiting your expenses to those things that you need rather than what you want. And what you need and what you want are two different things. So individuals need to start putting together a budget. If you haven't been budgeting before, now is the time to start budgeting, especially if you're going to be faced with job losses and a lack of income. So you need to have a look at what your income levels are and what your expenditure levels are. If you spend more than you receive, clearly you already know you've got a problem. And the thing that you need to do now is start to look at cutting out some of those expenses that are not essential. You also need to look at what assets and liabilities you have. Some of you, especially individuals who may live in London, you might not be in a very big property, but if you've been there a long time, you'll have quite a bit of equity in that property that you could either release that equity to fund you over a short period of time until you find another job, or you could downsize in order to release that capital so that you've got some emergency funds to see you through over the next 6 to 12 months or even longer. But we've also heard that, you might need to transition from the type of work that you're doing now into other forms of income that can support you. And those forms of income may not be as consistent as achieving a salary each month, and they won't be. I'm self-employed and I know that my income goes up and down. Fortunately, my husband works and he's in a role that he works completely from home and he does receive a paid salary each month. So it gives me the opportunity to work in a way that is not so predictable when it comes to my income streams. Some of you may not have that ability to do that. I saw one comment from someone saying that she's a single parent. So I get that it's not going to be as easy. But now is the time to really start looking at your finances and how you can best manage them and what other income streams you can start to generate. It might be something simple like caring for children, so opening your house to care for 1 or 2 children. I do realize that you need to have certain certificates or assessments done by the local authority in order for you to have children in the home, but fostering is also a good idea. There are online courses that you can do. I traditionally worked within the corporate environment for a number of years. I qualified as a chartered accountant and I worked in investments. And the last role I was doing was in corporate banking. But in 2015, I sort of had enough of that lifestyle. I left that role. I did work very short term, less than 2 years for the public sector. But then in 2018, I retrained completely as a financial advisor, did a load of exams, qualified, and now I work with a practice, but as a self-employed individual. So there aren't any rules or any kind of policies that govern how I relate or deal with my clients. Now, most of my business is online. Most of my meetings are either by telephone or Zoom. If you can also build an income stream that doesn't involve you having face-to-face contact with other individuals. But the time to start is now. It probably was time to start 2-3 years ago, but we are where we are. And as soon as you can start to make that transition, if you can keep your jobs, keep them for as long as you can. Don't just leave your role in order to start something new. But as you're still working through that period of grace that they've given you, whether it's the 1st of April or February, start looking at what other things you can do to generate another income stream. Now, once you've had a look at your finances, you'll need to make some serious and harsh decisions, and it will be different for different people. So I can't give you one formula that works for everyone. Each person will have a unique situation. So anyone that wants to contact me, you can do free of charge. I will give you that advice. You might also need to adjust in terms of what protection you might need to put in place, because if you are employed, some of you will have, death in service, life insurance. You may also have income protection, and there might be other employee benefits like pension contributions that you will no longer have once you leave your role and become self-employed. So what are you going to do to provide for yourself if you are approaching, let's say, retirement age, or very close to that, and your pension pot isn't very big? What things can you do to supplement yourself through that time? So as Lucille was saying, there are initiatives that other Adventists are looking at, helping other people to transition from the normal workplace into one that you're working for the Lord and you're able to generate an income that would be sufficient to meet your needs. Now, God's not going to, well, I'm not going to say he can't, but we're not really looking to become millionaires. That's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to generate sufficient income where we can meet those ongoing expenses, especially if we've got children and we've got other overheads. God knows that. And because he knows that, he will supply our needs. But it was said before, we need to go to the Lord prayerfully, and we need to ask the Lord, which direction should I take? We need to be honest about the talents that we've got. What talent do I have that I can use for the Lord, especially at a time like this, to transition? So if I can leave you with my parting advice, I would say that as soon as you can, you need to start thinking about what other forms of income can I generate? You need to look at your expenses, and you need to cut your expenses down as much as you can in order for you to generate excess or surplus income that you can start to save. Okay. Now we know that saving isn't for a long term, because as we see things happening, we can see that final events will be rapid ones. But until such time that all of our earthly supports are cut off, and we can no longer buy or sell, what we're trying to do is to get some kind of financial security around us, around our families, that will enable us to live from day to day. So like I said, if anybody wants to contact me for that personal advice, I'm very happy to do that free of charge. But let's start now. Let's start prayerfully. Let's not hide our head in the sand, because Sister White from years ago has told us all, get out of debt, stay out of debt. If you've managed to do that, fantastic. If you haven't, let's start doing something about it. And let's start working together to help each other. It might even mean that you have to go and live with other family members. Hopefully there'll be other Christians as well that can accommodate you. But I think now is the time for us to get together like the disciples of old, to share what we have and help each other through what might be a difficult journey ahead of us. So thank you very much for your time. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of the presentations that are scheduled for this evening. They've been brilliant so far. So thanks to the rest of the team. And over to you again, Pastor Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Laverne. Excellent. So I hear you saying, Laverne, downsize. Just look at downsizing. If you're in a position where you can, then that's good practical advice. You're also saying do a budget. If you've not been working on a budget, then this is time to look at where that cash is going, because sometimes when things are good, we can just spend without thinking.
Exactly.
And so we really need to look at drawing up that budget, and then thinking about what it is that we can do as an alternative. Yeah, and I did hear what you were saying about people who are single, because you're fortunate, you've got a husband that you can lean on. There are many people who are not in that kind of position, but this is the time, as you rightly say, for us to be really thinking about alternatives. And thank you very much for the offer. Individuals can get in touch with you, and they can contact Joan just to get your details if they're so minded. So thank you very much for an excellent presentation.
You're welcome. Thank you.
I don't see any questions there in the chat.
Pastor, they've been collated so far.
Okay.
We've got quite a number of questions. I've been copy and pasting them, and Sharon and Shirley also. So we will be sharing those questions.
Okay, you'll come back later on. All right. Okay. Let me come to Sonia. Sonia, welcome. Thank you for being here with us this afternoon. And it's over to you, Sonia. I don't even know where you are, Sonia. Are you in the UK or in Jamaica? Where are you?
I will answer that question, Pastor Davis. How are you? And thank you for the opportunity to be here. Thank you for the excellent presentation so far. And that just really dovetails into what I'm here to share with you now. So Pastor Davis, I'm somewhere in the sunshine, but yes, I'll be back soon. Yeah. Yes. So for those who are listening in, and welcome to this conference. You know, you're probably thinking, all right, so this is where I am now. I've made my decision one way or the other. What's next for you? How do I reposition myself? And I just want to come from a place of where, you know, my personal story, you know, how I made the transition. Okay, so it wasn't forced, but it was more my decision. So, you know, having to think about what does God want for you? What is it that you have in your hands? And the presenters previously, so I know Laverne mentioned this, also Lucille, we're talking about skills, you know, and Dr. Chidi as well. Is there, if you can, and let me just segue a little bit, sidestep, if you can put in the chat for me, whether on YouTube or on Zoom, is there a hobby or a skill that you're known for, but you actually don't work towards that skill or hobby? You may call it a side hustle for some people, but it's something that you're known for. You're the go-to person for this thing, this skill. It could be making cakes. Put in the chat, what is it that you have in your hands, but you're actually not working towards that right now? Because this is a time for reflection, and as you're being encouraged to pray about this, which direction now does God want you to go? Because there is so much work to be done, okay? And you're needed. So you are in your job, you're in the health profession, but there's something that you have a gift, and someone's waiting for that. Someone needs to be benefited from your gift, from your talent, whatever way you want to put it. I hear about cooking, encouraging, personal embroidery, you know, giving lectures, supporting, nutritional therapy, decorating, gardening, cooking. There's something there, you know, and it's a time for reflection and time for, okay, do I make this move now? How do I make it? So like myself, I was always interested in health. As a child growing up, of course, I was always partaking in health, some healthy remedies. And if you're from a Caribbean background or parentage, you know that at the end of every school holiday or the beginning of school term, you had to get what's called, we have the fancy word now as detoxification, but it was a purge, right? So I was always interested. All my siblings would make a face, or when mommy's not around, they will throw it through the living room window by the dining table, not knowing that, you know, she will find out. But I never questioned it. But the question I asked her was, why do I have to eat healthy? Why do you give me this to drink? And it's a case of, don't worry, just drink up. By saying to me, drink up is good for me, was not good enough for me. So when I became more responsible for my own cooking, I sort of kind of deviated from what I was brought up to do, to eat and how to live. And of course, not soon after, I started developing a lot of symptoms. digestive issues as well, to name a few: burping, bloating, you name them, whole cascade. And of course, I then had to see a naturopath doctor because I was getting medication and I did have some relief from it. But then it's, do I want to be on these medications for this long period of time? So I retrained, because following the guidelines and the protocols and the recommendations for me, my symptoms dissipated. I started feeling better. So I wanted to know more. So it took me back to my childhood days when I had that interest in, why do I have to do this? I'm interested in this. Tell me more. And so I segued into changing my career. So I studied and graduated, did some long clinical hours. And I was still holding my corporate job at the same time. And so with that came a lot of stress. So those who know work in a government setting, you know that there's cuts, financial cuts. And with financial cuts comes a heavier workload. And so I started being stressed. For those who work in a situation, you know how stressful life can be. You have your other lives to carry on with as well. And so I became very, very stressed out and decided I needed to make a change. Now, it was a case of, and I think this is where you're probably thinking, well, I need to make a change too, but will I be able to still pay my bills? And this is where a lot of people saying, yes, I'm forced to take the vaccine, but I have bills to pay. I have my family to care for. So how do I make ends meet? And it reminds me of a lot of stories. If you're familiar with the stories in the Bible, the Bible is littered with fear thou not. There are stories where we have to obey God and put our faith and trust in him. And so I now transferred into setting up my business. And the why for me was because I know I could help others, because I was actually giving advice and supporting people, family and friends. And when you look at the statistics in the UK, for example, obesity is on the increase. I wanted to be a part of that change. I wanted to not just work with my friends and family, but also in the community. I also was a part of my church health department. And of course, we did our health days and, meeting the needs of the community. But then I also wanted to do more, because in Pen of Inspiration that talks about in time to come, the work that will be available to us is the work of the medical missionary work. And in a nutshell, that's about health. Meeting the needs of the people, but meeting the pain points, getting to a place where you can actually help to resolve, bring relief to an individual who is suffering, who is in pain, whatever that pain is. It could be their pain is that they can't, unable to sleep at night. It could be that they have back pain or, irritable bowel syndrome, whatever the situation is. But that work is more readily available now and is needed now. So when I ask you the question, what do you have in your hands? What is it that you can bring to the table in the community in England? Because we have a lot of work to be done in England. What can you do? And I'm just quickly looking at the chat here about knitting, helping people work from home. These are all skills. I just love the responses, and thank you so much for responding to my question. Traveling, journaling, you have something here that other people need. You have something to give. So don't sit back and thinking, what am I going to do? There's something you can do about this. How did I go about setting up? Well, with trials and errors, of course. And I laugh because when I look back of you may have this passion, you want to help, but how do you go about doing that? How do you bring the awareness to people? Where do you go? So before you even having a logo or the color scheme of a website, you have the operational aspect of your business, of your ministry. You know what you want to do, but how do you manage to get that off the ground? And there are a lot of courses, online courses, sometimes free courses as well, that actually teaches you how to do the marketing aspect to get your message across. So then if you're knitting if you just want to work with young children, young teenagers for knitting, where do you market that? Where do you get the information to? If it's just cooking what meals? It's vegan meals, vegetarian meals, what meals are you cooking? Where do you go for that? Where do you actually gonna advertise or to get more awareness? And this is your time now to step out and not be fearful. You know, the Bible is littered with so many, if you're familiar with reading the Bible, I appreciate not all of us may read the Bible on a daily basis, but fear thou not, Isaiah 41 and verse 10, be not dismayed, because you serve a God and a living God. See, when we fear in itself, chronic fear is illness. And it's such a time where the mind and the body works very closely together, and eventually chronic fear brings illness. So I know I'm very short in my presentation, but the message I want to bring across here is it can be done to change. I think I read earlier in the chat, someone says, well, I'm 50 years old. What do I do now? Yes, there's so much you can do. If I'm speaking to a person still in Zoom, there's so much that you can do. There's something that you have to give, that someone is waiting for your skill, for your gift. And so step out boldly. God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of sound mind. Step out, pray, and ask for that direction of where to go. You know, there also comes a point where you think, okay, I do have a passion. Yes, I do. I want to help, but can I live? And Sister Laverne Picard spoke about the financial aspect of it. Yes, you need to live, and you need to get across and get past some blockages. And I'm speaking from experience, the mindset, money mindset, okay? How do you charge for your service? How do you go about that? How do you then mix the two? Because you so much want to help others, but it is possible for you to do that. With the marketing aspect I spoke about earlier. And, you know, the point here is step out and do not procrastinate. Do not let fear hold you back. Step out there and do and use the talents that God has given you, because someone else is actually waiting for your skill. A lot of people don't know how to sew, how to knit, and turn it into a business. Or if you like, if you're preferable to use the word, a ministry, do that. But fear thou not. There's lots more I would like to share, but I know time is of the essence. Over to you, Pastor Davis.
Thank you, Sonia. I really like that. Do not let fear hold you back. And sometimes we become paralyzed by fear. What am I going to do? You know, and so on. And the other term, what do you have in your hand? And people really sometimes don't realize what it is that they have in their hands. And so I think that you're really saying to people, don't allow fear to hold you back, you know, and this is the time, and maybe this is an opportunity. And from that, Sonia, maybe I could just say that maybe there are people on this platform this evening who are within the age range of taking their pension, you know, so it's a conversation that you've never thought of having with your employers, but rather than being dismissed, this is the time to take your pension and move on and do something else. You know, and my wife and I, we've taken early retirement, and what a blessing that is. And, you know, sometimes you think that, oh, I'm going to just keep on going. I don't want to leave work yet and so on. But circumstances put you in a situation where you feel that the time is right. So I think that, you know, what yourself and what Laverne was saying about just looking at your situation and thinking about your finances and downsizing, you know, and that aspect of downsizing, let me say, maybe this is time for people to think about country living, because the message of leaving the cities has left us way behind. You know, we have been left behind. And I think that this is now the time for us to think about doing some of those things. And somebody has put in the chat here that really what God is doing now is preparing us, and maybe this is the right time for us to think about doing some of those things that we have been reluctant to do, and it's come upon us now that we really have to think about that.
Yes, boss, and you know, it's also, you know how stressful the work situation can be, and it's a time as this where now you probably start to start living. You mentioned yourself that, you know, you took early retirement, and it could be that time of your life when, saying to those who are listening in, time for me now to step out of the usual race, the fast pace, you know, which can be so debilitating to the body. It can break the body in so many different areas. That stress, don't underestimate the stress. And it could be time, you know, refocus the mind, refocus, you know, and, you know, leave the glitz and the glamour somewhere else. And this is now time to live.
Okay, thank you. I do have a question for Dr. Chidi and Dr. Aletta. Let me just read it. It says, is it possible to check to see if we have B cells or T cells that resist the virus? And if so, is this strong enough argument to make you exempt from the vaccine? I know what the answer is already, Doc. Dr. Chidi or Dr. Aletta? Dr. Chidi, yes, go ahead.
Yes, hello there. Hi. Look, I mean, there are tests. If we had enough money to test people generally for this, that would be wonderful. But I don't think the NHS or anybody's going to be investing into that. I mean, maybe Dr. Alita can give us more.
So, but if you are an NHS employee, you're entitled to a free antibody test, which will see whether you've been exposed to COVID, but it doesn't actually differentiate between the B and the T cells. But it can give you a titer or a level of what your antibodies were at the present time that you have been tested. And you can possibly try it and see if in 3 months' time whether your antibodies remain the same or whether they decrease, etc., etc. But there is nothing specific. But to answer your other question, Pastor Davis, is that there's nothing in the mandates that have been put by law that even account for natural immunity. It seems that worldwide the decision has been made by the highest, as it were, that everybody needs to be vaccinated regardless of whether you've had COVID last week and you've got good immunity, that they just want people to be vaccinated.
That's right, they own you. So it doesn't matter whether you've got natural immunity or whatever, you need to take the jab. And that's the message, isn't it?
Yeah, interestingly, when the vaccines first started and we didn't know that much about it, there was an argument that if you'd had COVID-19, you had a positive PCR test, etc., that you were not to have the vaccine for another 6 months. That's what it was recommended, because you were recovering from a virus, and then exposing the body to a vaccine might not be beneficial. So there was a kind of a leeway for you not to have the vaccine, but that has now been scrapped.
Sure. Okay. Thank you very much, Doctor. So let me come to David Bartholomew. David, we're happy to have you on the platform. David is a physiotherapist, and thank you for joining us. Please go ahead.
No, excellent. Thanks a lot. I was just wondering if I had sharing rights at all. Can that be arranged? Oh, here we are. There we are. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Here we go. Just let me know if you can see my screen. Happy days. Okay, right. So, I mean, I was just asked to come on to this platform and to talk about my experience as a physiotherapist. I mean, I started off, as you mentioned earlier on, Pastor Davis, in the NHS. As time transpired, I've worked my way through and eventually started a clinic down in Kent, private clinic, where I was working in the NHS and also doing private work. I then eventually got into doing private work completely. Now, this was not without any sort of concern, because as was alluded to, I think by my sister, this financial advisor, that when you're working for yourself, you have peaks and troughs with regards to the money that's coming in. And yeah, that was very much the case, because at that stage, my good lady wife, Ellen, we had decided co-jointly to homeschool the children, so she was at home, so it was difficult. However, I like what Dr. Chidi Ngwaba said there, and it's really important, I think, for us to really take this on board, and as God's people, and I appreciate that there are individuals who are not possibly who are not Christians, or maybe not Seventh-day Adventist Christians, but but the fact is that in anything that you do in moving forward, it's imperative that you communicate with God, and that you wait for His direction. Sometimes people say, "Oh, just move forward," and see how you get on, and so on and so forth. But if you're going to move forward, you've got to ensure that you have had your conversation, had your time with God. And I just wanted to just start out with one particular text that is quite pertinent, I think, especially for now, as we see, as far as I'm concerned, see the day approaching. It's taken from Ezra chapter 8, verse 21, and it says, "Then I proclaimed a fast there at the river Ahava, that we might afflict ourselves before our God, to seek of Him a right way." Now we know that God never makes a mistake, right? So a right way for us, and not only for us, but also for our little ones, so for our children and for our substance. So this is where we come into the aspect of like the financial aspect of things. So it's all encompassing, and this is really what I endeavored to do. I mean, eventually we took the counsel of Ellen White, and we moved out from sort of London. We are now situated in Wales, and we moved out into Wales at 2010. And it's really interesting because when we moved out here, I was still doing my practice, or what was left of it, in London. So I would be ferrying back and forth. And so effectively, there was a practice that was in an area called Llanelli. And I popped in there to see a physio who was running a practice. And to cut a long story short, I started subcontracting with that physio, and eventually we were able to purchase the practice. Now, obviously, there needs to be some kind of funds that you need to get your hands onto, whether it be savings or, whether it be, I mean, I wouldn't suggest a loan at this stage in terms of the banking system, as it were. But whatever means the Lord puts in your hand, He opens the doors. And when God opens the door, you must go through them. And so that's what we did. And, I put out a fleece with regards to the practice, and the Lord said yes, effectively, to us purchasing the practice. But it's interesting that the individual started the practice in 2009. We moved out here in 2010. I started working in that practice subcontractively 2011. And 2006, the practice was taken over by, 2016, my wife and myself, we basically took over the practice. So God, He will order your steps. And this is the practice, as you can see here, Physiotherapy Rehabilitation Clinic is where we're presently working. I'm just going to show you a couple of slides of what it looks like. There's a reception desk, there's a waiting area, and you've also got sort of a treatment room there, treatment room number 1. And we have there a couple of other treatment rooms that we have. And this is the area where we do sort of like exercise classes and so on and so forth. Which obviously during the pandemic we haven't really been doing because wearing masks and exercises are not really necessarily conducive. Having said all of that, really it's like the main crux, the main thrust of the matter, I think, is that when you're endeavoring to start a business of sorts, you need to be guided. There are so many things that you need to take into consideration, and with the practice that you don't realize how much goes into running a practice or doing your own sort of like self-employment work. When you actually own the business, you've got to think about staff, you've got to think about paying the staff and making sure there's sufficient funds, various other aspects that a business is required to do. So I mean, really and truly, I mean, I think from the perspective of and it's something I need to look into. I think it was Dr. Oleta mentioned. I need to look into the CQC business in some detail. But I'm very much of the mindset, and have been of the mindset of that you should never really put all of your eggs into one basket, because if that basket's taken away, you have no eggs. So really, there are other aspects that, personally, I've looked into that, say, for example, the practice was to be sort of like threatened, because at the end of the day, I'm actually self-employed. I'm the director, and I'm not putting any of my staff into a position where they have to be vaccinated and so on and so forth, because I personally don't believe that, the vaccination is something that needs to be had. But obviously, you've got the mandate and the law and so on and so forth that's been put in place. But I mean, having said that, I've looked into various other areas, and I'd have to have clarification on this. Probably Dr. Chidi would be able to advise on this, probably even Dr. Aletta, with regards to the control, sort of like a vaccination group that they have. Don't know if anybody has heard of it, but I personally joined myself onto the vaccination control group. And as I understand it, the vaccination is very much at the present moment experimental, or should I say it's a trial. And based upon that, every trial, every experimentation that is carried out does need to have some form of control against which it can and has to be measured against to see whether it is having the effect that it needs to have. However, I understand that there are very many sort of like different parameters that need to be considered also. But this is something that has been established. It's established in various countries, the US, various parts of Europe, and they have a very litigation sort of lawyers and so on and so forth that are basically supporting this system. So something that I don't know if anybody's heard of it, but it could be looked upon. But the other factor is, for me, as I was talking about not putting your eggs into in one basket, there are other things that I personally have been looking at, and again, it's to promote health. And I don't know if anybody's heard of the seed nutrition. Basically, I'm looking for individuals who are willing to partner and basically establish what they call an e-commerce business, whereby you don't have to have a vaccination. It's all done web-based, and there are various teaching methods that are being used over Zoom, so on and so forth, by Dr. Bradford Wicks in the US. That happens once a week. So this is something that's available. I have to say that, looking at this particular product, there are patients of mine who are using this, and it has made a huge amount of difference to their health. And one thing particularly now, it is very helpful in establishing and enhancing your immune system. So that's one thing that you could possibly use as another means or income stream to facilitate your getting through this time. And obviously, we, as I've said earlier, we have a very short time. I mean, we don't know how much longer. We pray God he kind of really gives us a little bit more time, because money, as we know, is they're endeavoring to digitalize it, and that will give them much more control. So effectively, we don't know how much time we have in terms of using that old sterling that we've got there, but we've got to work as quickly as we can. There are other methods and means that I'm involved in. It's called the utility warehouse, and these are ways and means of actually generating income, helping individuals to reduce their outlay of monetary, sort of like facilitating their money into their utilities around the house. All of these things are quite helpful, and then many people may have heard of this method and means of sorting your diet out. It's another. It can be expensive, but it's a way of controlling your health, or helping your health system as well, which is called the Salad Master health promotion cookware. And really, pretty much, that's all I really wanted to say. But the most important thing, I think, is that we endeavor to, as I think Dr. Chidi really hit the nail on the head for me. It's like, it's a case of putting our hands in the man who can and endeavoring to listen to his still small voice saying, this is the way, walk ye in it. But also, I think it's a time as well for us as God's people to try and start working much more cohesively together and to galvanize and to start promoting that work that God has called us to, that amazing medical missionary work, because that is what I also embrace within the clinic as well. Although patients may not be fully aware of that, but principles, the New Start principles is what facilitates or governs the practice that I carry out. So yeah, I think it's important that we really definitely get ourselves together and work as God's people need to. Thank you.
Excellent, David. Excellent. Thank you so much. God bless you, sir. I want to call on Dr. David Addo at this time, if he would come on, and then we're going to do a summation of what's been presented to us this evening and to take some questions before we close out. Dr. David. You're on mute at the moment. You're still muted. You're on mute. I can still, you're still muted, David. No, you're muted.
Right.
Can hear you now.
It's a pleasure meeting you after many years, though not in person. In the bio, well, hi to everyone. I am located in Accra, Ghana, and I've been here since 2009. But I was in England and I studied at Newbold. When I completed my master's in theology, New Testament, I was told to be a minister, I needed to do a master's in pastoral ministry. So I went back, did the pastoral ministry, but on completion, I branched off into social work. In social work in the early 90s, that was when we started developing services for Black and minority ethnic groups, and I was a lead project officer on that in a local authority. 4 years down the line, I became a service manager in another authority. A few years later, I became a business manager, then head of service. In this role, I developed several skills and learning and expertise. For example, I was the bronze in emergencies. So when there is a big emergency in London, I was the one who controlled the situation on the ground, moving people, coordinating places, working with the police and the emergency services and volunteers to make sure that we secure the safety of everyone within the area, including pets and whatever has life. But then I developed skills in other areas, building maintenance and restructuring, construction of new buildings. I wasn't involved, but the technicians and architects and the various service engineers had to report to me in my office. In 2009, I restructured myself from being head of service and said goodbye to UK. I do come to the UK often. But from a theological background, I like us to consider a few critical points in setting up your own business. And I like to say that if we see God as a businessman and the way he structures and plans his business and take a few cues from him, we will do well. Currently, I've retired because I am now doing more of online consultation rather than the practical. I do visit a few individuals in their homes. So I'd like you to take cognizance of Genesis chapter 1. And in Genesis chapter 1, there's a business plan in Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1 tells us about having a mission. So God's mission was to create the heavens and the earth. So he had a mission. When you have a mission, you want to become independent. You want to go on your own, whatever you want to set up. You must have a goal that will drive your mission. And so God's mission was that he's not only creating the heavens and the earth. But the goal was that it would be populated by intelligent beings with whom he will share himself. So your mission must be supported by a goal. When you have that goal, you must now break down the steps you're going to take to come to the realization of your goal. And in the same chapter, you'll find God had a time, in other words, a time frame, the day God saw that what he had done was good. There is a point where you come to a review process as to whether what you're doing is helping you to meet your set goals, and as well as meeting the objectives. Now, when you set objectives, you must also prioritize them, because if you don't prioritize them, you'll be throwing your darts all over the place, and you'll find you can come to a point where you'll be frustrated. And so coming to Ghana, even though I was born in Ghana, was an interesting thing. I had lived here for 22 years. Yet on my return, I realized that the country I left had changed. So as a naturopath, and with my experience in leadership and all the skills I had developed, how do I build a business that will sustain the family without thinking necessarily that money is the primary reason for my coming? My coming is to reach the unreached. So how do I get to the affluent who in this side of the world deal with God by proxy? So I set up the clinic, and one of the critical factors I found was my disadvantage is that we don't consolidate our efforts. So there were others who had clinics, but we could not come together to see where we have our crossing over lines. I heard from a few of the presenters, let us develop a network of SDA businesses. We must work together. We must come to a point of knowing that we cannot work in silos. And I like what Dr. Chidi said, that he has a plan and he wants people to come on board. Now, the people who come on board must make sure that they understand the vision, they understand the goal, and the role they play, so that it will be something that can be sustained over a long period. And that's the only way you can sustain your income. So you're not going in for just a short-term kind of gain, but it's a long haul. And you see, one of the critical things I found coming here is that you had the opportunity of meeting people who otherwise you would not have come across using the medical machine approach. So I had very interesting characters coming to me who otherwise I would not have met, but because they had a health need. And through my radio, television programs, and the lectures and the talks, they realized I had something to benefit them. So they came to me. So it's important. I wouldn't want to say much, but I want to say that if you go to set up a business, make sure the basic structures are in place. Take time to review them. See where things are not going right. How can you tweak? What can you do? Who do you need to assist and to help you refocus? For instance, in England, you have a lot of individuals who have pockets of activities going on. And let me drill down. You have people who have allotments. We're talking about healthy eating and healthy living. And yet everybody does their small things in their own small corner. However, if we come to a point where individuals can now begin to form a network of outgrowers, I'll call them, and then they begin to advertise. And now we have the tech to help us do that. We'll be able to sustain our living in these difficult times. Whether we like it or not, the difficult times will come, not would come, will come. And when it comes, like Daniel, sometimes some of us will have to be in Babylon. But in Babylon, we've got to stay strong. And so having come to Ghana, bought a 100-acre land with the view of setting up a sanatorium, but things didn't work out. So what do? I set up a small clinic and started developing the land into a natural reserve. It's still in progress, working through things. So right now I've developed farms, on the land. I help people, and through that, I'm able to share literature in the area. Not only that, in my work, you've got to make sure that people you take on understand the reason for doing the work. Oftentimes, people see money as the first thing. What do I get? And I'm glad almost all persons who've spoken have said money should not be the primary factor, because God is more than able to keep us, provide for our every need. And if we trust God in everything we do, and we ask God for his plan for our lives, and we understand clearly what his plan is for us, we will have no fear. And sometimes, like David said, there are peaks and troughs. But when you're in the valley, you must know that the God who took you up the mountain is also in the valley. And it's been an interesting journey for me. I've had the privilege of traveling all few countries in Africa. Whilst I was in England, I've been to Brussels, Germany, France, and a few other places, presenting the health message and getting people to come to know that the truth we hold is so powerful, in the sense that it combines both the gospel, which is the truth, and embedded in the truth is that we maintain healthy bodies. I want to say that do not be afraid if you want to work for God. Sometimes the detours are the true pathways that God wants to take you. And so whilst you're on that detour, never be afraid. There were times I felt like, hey, things are not going as I planned. Should I pack up and come back to England, or do I stick and stay? I decided to keep going. And to be honest with you, just before the conference, I got a call, but I had to tell the person that, hey, I've got a conference call, so can we talk after the conference? Once you've perfected a God-given skill, and in your delivery, you offer the best of the gift, the talent, the capability, and the experience in your services, you will always be on demand. And so whether you sit at home or you're on the net, once people know they can get the best of service from your facility or whatever activity you're doing, you're guaranteed God will bring the people. I've had people coming from the US, from UK to see me in Ghana, from Sierra Leone, Abidjan, Togo. A woman had an accident in Togo, 3 years, couldn't walk. Church member from Ghana calls her and says, look, hey, there is someone here. I've had opportunity of treating people who've gone through clinical surgeries, and doctors have said, look, we've done the best we can, and at this point we can't do any more. So you've got to travel out of the country and seek medical attention out of the country. The person comes to my clinic, and basically the whole family now becomes part of my clientele. And so without saying much, what I want to say is that plan well, have partners not necessarily working with you, but partners with whom you will have the opportunity of talking to, or a review panel who will tell you they're happy with the way you're going, or are there ways you could tweak or adjust what you're doing. Have a willing heart to be humble enough to listen when you're told probably this aspect is not what is necessary in this part of the domain. I'm saying this because I'm in Africa. In England, you've highlighted a lot of things, but here it's a bit fluid. So some of the things you may want to bring to Africa may be suitable for the UK, but may not be necessarily what they need here. I mean, if you're talking about, for example, the flu, you take your car to the mechanics, nobody is wearing masks. You go to the farm, they said, well, we've heard the name, but we don't know what it is, what it looks like. And so everybody goes free, and sometimes I am also walking there freely, and sometimes I say, hey, be careful. But knowing what I know, I make sure that I'm constantly working towards building my immunity so that I can live and work freely. I mean, God has been so good. I got trapped in the UK last year when COVID started. And I treated a few people in England who had the COVID. It's not they said they had COVID. These are nurses who were diagnosed and had breathing problems. And basically I helped them through the process, quite a few. And recently, one of your people from the UK is in Ghana, has been struggling with breathing. And just this morning, they sent a message, David, thank you for your remedy. Last night was the best night I've ever had. So we must seek God's guidance, but we must also seek to equip ourselves leading on God. In closing, I would like to say, plan well, make sure you are clear in the direction of travel, use all the skills and capabilities, link up to a network of peers or people you can seek to act like a board, not necessarily a formal board, but people who can help you rethink your direction. And when things are good, stay on. When it gets bad, it's not all that bad. God is still in the business and he'll help you. So I've had many challenges, but I am excited, still going on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. David. Wonderful, wonderful. And you know, the word that you're saying there again was let go of fear. Don't be afraid. Let God lead you. Let's put our trust and our confidence in God. So I just want to thank everybody for the presentations that you've made today, and people have really been encouraged and inspired. And what I'd like to do now is just to, as somebody has put here a question, can you explain what criteria someone will need to join this program? And I think that, you know, we are here, we've put this program on today. We also want to do a part 2. So for those of you who need more information, we'd like to do that. But one of the things I want to pick out today is this concept of letting go of fear, looking at what you have in your hands. Maybe you have not thought about, and I alluded to it before, maybe you are at that point where you can retire. Look at talking to your employers about early retirement. Look at downsizing. This was something that Laverne mentioned. You've got money wrapped up in your house. This is the time to look at releasing that, moving out into the country. And, you know, let's remember, beloved, that we have been told this message for a very, very long time to get out of the cities. And I think that this is the time for us to be thinking about how we can do that. My wife and I made that transition 5 years ago. This is not something that you can do at the drop of a hat. You really need to think about it. You need to plan ahead and look carefully, think carefully. I get people calling me and saying, Pastor, we want to come to Spain, but you know, we have left the EU, and therefore it's no longer possible for people just to come to Spain or go to any country in Europe for that matter. So there are those legal things that you need to think about. But there is a lot of benefit and blessing in making that transition to the country. Maybe people have left for Wales, they've left for Scotland. One of the things my wife and I did as we were preparing for this lifestyle training was we went to Romania. One of the things I noticed was that the Romanians, they always talked about the country, the house that they've built up in the mountains. You know, they've always got a plan. And so make sure that you have a plan so that you can think about how you are going to look after yourself and your family, how you're going to make the transition. So there's been a lot on this platform for us to think about today. And let me just ask this question. Somebody's put in the group chat, is there any practical advice on where individuals can go to reskill? Dr. Aletta, any suggestions on how people can reskill themselves? Chidi, anybody on those who are seeking to reskill?
I would say that to do something that you actually enjoy is the most important thing. So if you have a hobby or something that you've been given as a talent, that could be something that you can use to tide yourself over, and then reskill in that regard is what my advice would be.
Okay, thank you, Laverne.
Yeah, I would just say to type in Google, or if you're on LinkedIn, have a look on LinkedIn. There are free courses on LinkedIn if you're registered there. If not, register on there. But you can just type in online free courses, especially if you're from the BAME community. You know, there are courses that they're offering for free at various institutions of learning. So definitely look to do that.
Okay, thank you so much. So we've had Dr. Chidi with his life colors. He has put his details on the screen. If you're minded to get in touch with him, I like the suggestions made by David Bartholomew there. Some of the seeds that he's selling. I think there were 2 different entities there that you could think of. So whatever is in your hand, that was the statement that Sonia used. What do you have? And sometimes, you know, we have more than we really realize that we can be using as we think about transitioning, as we think, you know, what I see hearing from Dr. Chidi and Dr. Aletta is that the government is not interested in how much natural immunity you may have. Your name might be Jesus Christ and you're walking on water. You've got to take the jab. That's the message that's coming across. And so if you are determined, or if you've decided that that's not the direction that you want to go, and I think that Dr. Aletta pointed out as she began about informed consent, and the fact that really for her as a surgeon to do anything to us, she needs our permission. The government is really squeezing us so that they can extract that consent under duress. And, you know, we are at that point in history where, you know, the Bible tells us that no man may buy or sell. And we're coming to that place where we're seeing people will no longer be able to buy or sell the way they used to because we're being pushed out of our jobs and our livelihoods. And it is a life-changing event. But I believe that everyone on this platform today has given us ideas that, and you need to start planning from now, thinking about it. When my wife and I made the transition to country living, we had been talking for quite some time, looking at where we would go to retire. And eventually when the time came and we decided, you know, at least we've been having a conversation. And so you really do need to be having a conversation. And sometimes, you know, at the beginning of the pandemic, I realized that there were, a wife may want to move, husband doesn't want to move. Husband and wife may want to move, but the children are saying, what are you doing? You know, we're quite happy where we are. So, you know, there's a lot of things for families to be thinking about and praying together. And there's a key word. You know, let us be praying. These are very, very difficult times, but God has not left us comfortless. And I think that he is willing to lead us as we think about what's happening in our world and the circumstances that bring us together on this platform. But what do you have in your hands? What can you be using? What skills do you have? What can you be releasing? You know, maybe you're living in that house where you can release the equity, move into something smaller. Think seriously about country living. One of the things that happened at the beginning of the pandemic was, you know, I was getting food for my mother. I would buy it online and just couldn't get any food. And so I called my brother in the UK and said, can you go and get some food for mum? He says, Sam, the shops have run out. You know, I said, you're joking. And I called my son-in-law, can you get some food? He said, no. They said, you know, it's really bad here. And I thought, what are these guys talking about? Let me take a walk down to my local store in Spain. I walked down there and everything was on the shelf in the village, and thinking, hey, you know, so the madness that was happening around people in the city, we just were not experiencing that in the countryside. And so, you know, it's just a warning to all of us to be thinking differently. What can we be doing? And I just want to say thank you to all our guests who have come on, given us their time and their expertise to be with us. And we thank you for joining us this evening. May the Lord be with you and bless you as you think about what's coming. And Dr. Aletta, who works for the NHS, has already made it clear that, you know, if it's going to happen, then January or February is the first jab to transition you. So, you know, by April, you would have had both jabs. And remember that you are on the treadmill, because when a bully comes to you and says, bullies you and takes 10 pounds from you, and you give him 10 pounds, next week he'll be back for another 10 pounds and so on. So when you take that double jab, they still threaten you with the loss of your job for the third and the fourth and the fifth. One of the things that I wanted to show you was and I didn't share my screen. Maybe I should do that now. I don't know. Yeah, as we close out, let me share this with you, because I thought it was quite humorous. Yes, the Pfizer loyalty card. There you go. So dose 1 and dose 2, and then booster 1, booster 2, booster 4, 5, 6, 7, and then you'll get a toaster at the end, you know. But the truth is, beloved, it doesn't stop there. Once you've taken that double jab, you are on the treadmill, and there are individuals who are saying, this body of mine is precious, and we don't want to go in that direction. So Sonia, Laverne, Dr. Aletta, Dr. Chidi, David, Dr. David in Ghana, for all of you who came on today, thank you so much for your inspiration. And also Lucille, I didn't see Lucille, thank you so much for your willingness to share with us today. And we're gonna close out with prayer. Dr. Chidi, why don't you pray for us to close?
Thank you. Father in heaven, we are continually grateful to you. We know what you have in store ultimately for us, and you have given us this wonderful plan of salvation. Lord, we pray that this love, this grace, your spirit that dwells within us will continue to sustain us no matter what. Where we are, we're all in different places, but we ask that you will continue to guide us, give us wisdom, give us understanding, and allow us to navigate our way through this time. And may we continue to realize that we are just your servants. We're here to do your work. We're here to spread your gospel. It's not all about us. It really is about you. And Lord, we just ask that for all those listening and beyond, that your spirit will continue to rest on us all. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.
Amen. Amen. Thank you very much. If there's any one of our presenters that you want to get in touch with, Jen, are you still with us online? Let me close out with coming back to you, John. You were the one who introduced us, and John has been one of our principal organizers. Are you there, John? Okay. Well, if anyone wants to get in touch with any one of our presenters, Dr. Chidi or Lucille, David, please just contact John in the way you did for registration, and she will be able to point you in the right direction. So thank you all very much, and God bless you. Bye-bye.
Joan, you're on mute.
I'm sorry, everyone. Thank you, Pastor, and thank you, everyone. Just to let everyone know, there is going to be a part 2. There's quite a number of requests in the chat, and I believe that it is necessary to have that. Thank you all for joining us. We went over time, but I am absolutely delighted that our presenters have presented the information they have. And someone called it golden nuggets, and I totally agree. So thank you. So Pastor Davis, that's it from me. I have email addresses already, and I will be sending out information in due course. And the video on YouTube is going to remain there, so people can feel free to go back to the video. So thank you again, everyone, for attending. It's been an absolute delight. Thank you.